Next to me is the quickest, most powerful, most technologically advanced, and prettiest Toyota Prius that has ever existed. Like the previous generation Prius, this new Prius is available in two different versions. The hybrid version that we drove last fall, and this, the all-new Prime plug-in hybrid. With over 40 miles of all-electric range and well over 200 horsepower, is this the most fun Prius you can buy? Let's find out. All right, so behind the wheel of the Prius Prime, if you watch my first drive of the Prius, the non-plug-in hybrid, which will be linked below, you'll see a lot of the things that I both liked and disliked about the standard hybrid Prius. Some of the things that I like, obviously the exterior design I think is gorgeous. The interior design itself looks very good. It looks futuristic. It looks modern. Not entirely sold on the steering wheel sitting so low with the cluster sort of up here. But some of the interior plastics, I think, especially here on the door or sort of down here where my knee hits, could be a little bit softer. Ultimately, this starts at, right around $30,000, so it's not a bad, it's not really a bad place to be for that. Heated, ventilated seats and all that stuff. But some of the drawbacks, like I said, some of the plastics, rear seat headroom isn't quite as nice as it was on the previous car. The sort of drone of the CVT, which you're not really going to be able to hear right now, but when you're driving in hybrid mode, you give it a little bit of throttle, it'll be like, wah. The Korean automakers put a traditional 6-speed or 8-speed automatic in a car in their hybrids. It doesn't get as good a fuel economy, but it just feels like a better sort of overall experience. I'm on the highway right now. I'm on the 5. It's quiet enough. I've been in some EVs that are definitely a little more quiet. There is some road noise, especially sort of coming from the rear of the vehicle, sort of down towards where the tires would be. I wouldn't say it's anything offensive by any stretch, but it's a little bit louder than maybe some of the other cars that I've been in recently. But this also does have a gasoline-powered motor. Now, what this car has over the standard Prius is way more power. Both the all-wheel drive and the standard front-wheel drive Prius both fall a little bit under the 200 horsepower range. This one's well into the 200s, and when you put your foot down, this car will scoot. Toyota claims a 0 to 60 time of 6.6 seconds, and I do believe it. I don't, so like the drone of the CVT as you get there, but it's a very quick car for highway driving, for doing long miles, for getting up to speed, even on these notoriously shortened on-ramps here in California. Plenty of power, plenty of performance, and the advantage of the plug-in hybrid, other than more power, is you get roughly 40 miles of all-electric range. Plug it in, it takes, I think, somewhere around, they were claiming a 24 amp 240, so that should be around 3 kilowatts or so. So overnight, you'll be able to get your full charge range for sure. And as long as you're driving 40 miles or less every day, you may never use the gas motor, but you'll always have that sort of backup option to, hey, if I want to do a longer road trip or whatever. And I like this car. I genuinely I do. I like sort of the way the infotainment's laid out. Every newer version of this new Toyota connected system works better than the previous version. I like how they implement the wireless charging pad, which kind of slots your phone in kind of like a Nintendo cartridge, which is a great way to prevent you from staring at it, but also kind of secure it in case so it doesn't go flopping around. This particular color, the dark gray that I have, has a reddish interior. The red trim pieces are nice. In the Prime, there's a little bit of a red accent lighting that goes underneath the infotainment system. In the standard Prius, it's blue. But in both cars, what's cool is if you're sitting at a traffic light and the car in front of you starts to pull away, the light will start pulsating to kind of give you a little bit of a nudge, like, hey, pay attention, traffic's moving, which is pretty cool. Otherwise, gosh, this is a pretty car. And it really doesn't look like a lot of what else is on the road. And Toyota's going through this phase right now, especially when you guys eventually see the marketing for this, where they'll be like, oh, Prius is pretty now. Oh, Prius is cool. Oh, kind of trying to shake off that old image. Now, It's like, well, are they trying to say that it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because this new car is prettier. It's far prettier than the old car. But then it's like, well, if they could have always built a pretty car, why didn't they? And if the people that bought the previous Prius didn't, upgrade to this one, did they make a bad choice by buying a previously ugly Prius? So it's a weird way to attack the marketing. What I will say, though, is if you're coming from any Prius prior to this one, whether it's the Prime or the regular traditional hybrid, you're going to be blown away by the new Prius. Drives better, rides better, it's quieter. The CVT is actually quieter in these new cars. Better range on the plug-in hybrid. The availability sort of for all-wheel drive on the standard car, which now carries over, it's more powerful than it was before. The infotainment is new. It has wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. This feels like a technologically modern car. My biggest complaints, biggest criticisms, other than I kind of wish some of these plastics were a little nicer, is honestly, it's sort of like, how does Prius and Prius Prime fit in 2023? So if you walk into a showroom, the entire showroom is full of hybrids, all the way from the Corolla Cross hybrid that I'm also driving today, all the way up through Tundra as a hybrid. So Prius is no longer synonymous with hybrid. And I don't know, from a marketing standpoint, where Prius kind of fits. Now, they're going to tell you, oh, well, this is for the driver that wants to drive a more attractive looking car. And I do think it's more attractive. I'm considering replacing the kind of beater car that I have now that I drive back and forth to the airport with when I don't have a press car. I could see this Prius being that car. But, the Corolla Cross has a little bit more space. The RAV, if the Corolla Cross doesn't have enough space, the RAV definitely has some more space. The RAV Prime is an excellent plug-in hybrid, if you can find one. And the Prius is just, it's no longer an innovator. Now, there's some cool stuff on here that other car makers aren't doing or offering, such as this particular spec that I am in has a solar roof. So I think it's a 150-watt solar roof that when the car is parked, it'll send power to the lithium-ion battery. And then while you're driving, it helps support the 12-volt system. So it'll help support the climate control, radio, functions like that. So, that's sort of innovative in that it's not innovative because Prius has had it before, but it's a thought process. It's thinking, well, how can we help improve the efficiency? The roof's already here. We already know that there's something that needs to go there. So why not offer a solar-powered roof, a solar roof for it? Yeah, it's not making a lot of electricity, but it's some. But gosh darn it, Toyota even has an EV right now, a BZ4X, and while it's not our favorite EV by any stretch, there's going to be more coming, and the competition now isn't strictly hybrids, it is EVs. You could go buy a Bolt EUV or a Bolt EV and save $5, $6, $7 over a Prius, a comparably equipped Prius. You can get Super Cruise on the Bolt EUV. The Bolt, of course, is hindered by its DC fast charge rate, which is slow. But, if you're going to stay under those 200, 220 miles of range that car has, gosh, that's not a bad thing. Especially if you're looking at a Prius as a commuter, your second car. Then it's almost like, well, should you buy the Prius, or should you go for an EV, an inexpensive EV, like the Bolt or Leaf? Ultimately, bottom line, I'll sum it up for you here. If you can live with an EV and you don't want to spend a ton of money, I think the Bolt is actually a pretty good way to go. I personally couldn't live with a Bolt every day. Not because it's a terrible car or anything like that, but simply put, I drive too many miles on days that I have to go back and forth to the airport, and I don't want to have to sit at a DC fast charger at 55 kilowatts. I don't want to do it. So now, a very efficient hybrid then kind of comes into play. If you're doing a lot of miles for whether it's work or personal or whatever, then it's like, okay, well, do I go with Prius Prime or do I go with Prius? If most of your driving is 40 miles or less during any one particular day, then the occasional longer route, then get the Prius Prime. Especially because you should be able to get, hopefully, a lease deal with the $7,500 incentive, but that keeps changing all the time. Under 40 miles most of the time, but want the security of a gas engine, Prius Prime's the way to go. If you want all-wheel drive, or you drive more than 40 miles at a time, then the traditional Prius, the new traditional Prius, makes a lot of sense. Because at 54 to 56 mpg, compared to the 52 of this, the car is lighter, the all-wheel drive gives you a little bit more all-weather durability, and it's going to be a little bit more efficient for a little bit less money. So that's sort of the thing. Drive a lot of miles, get the Prius. Sometimes drive a lot of miles, but mostly 40 or less, get the Prius Prime. If you are looking at a second car that you only need to drive back and forth to work, things like that, maybe look at a cheap EV, an inexpensive EV. It's you have the ability. I think you can save some money there. Live in an apartment, don't have access to that, don't want to fuss with that. The Prius I still think is a very good car. But when you walk into that showroom, it's not going to be a cut and drive thing. You may walk in and say, I'm here for a Prius, and it's a beautiful car, and you're like, yes, that's what I want. But then maybe you drive the Corolla Cross, and you're like, well, and you end up walking out with a Corolla Cross, or a RAV4, or maybe even a standard Corolla. So the message is the Prius may be right for you, but it also may not be. But that's okay, because in that Toyota showroom will be something that you want. Despite a couple of little niggles, we find the new Prius Prime to be one of the most compelling products in Toyota's lineup, and should be on your shortlist if you're looking for a good ranged plug-in hybrid with a little bit of style. Don't have the ability to charge at home, but would like the new Prius in your driveway? Check out our full first drive review of the regular hybrid version of the new Prius by clicking right here.